Hello. So you may be asking, why are we dealing with databases and what do related databases have to do with information architecture anyways? And the short answer is everything. One of the best programmers and creative minds I've ever known in terms of programming is one said that everything is a database. And essentially it's true. Everything can be brought down to discrete pieces of information which can be stored in data and presented as such. Relational database systems make sense of that data in order to understand it as information. So how does that relate to the kind of things that we might relate to? Well, you've probably all heard of WordPress, right? And WordPress basically is a content management system that, for managing blog posts, content, it's a system where you, without having to code, you can post information and you can essentially create content strategies that you can then deploy in WordPress. But WordPress essentially, all the content in WordPress is kept in a database. What I'm showing you here is the database entity relationship diagram that represents everything that goes into WordPress. So if I blow this up a little bit, so hopefully that'll happen. Let me just click here. There. Okay, so I'm just going to scroll around this a little bit so you can see what I'm talking about. So here, for instance, in WordPress, their users are people who can author and administrate and do things on WordPress. Well, here's the WordPress table. And here are some field names that will kind of either sound familiar and make some sense. User login, user password, user nickname or nice name, user email, user URL, and so forth. Okay, so then now a user, remember in our diagram that you'll be learning about entity relationship diagrams, the user can own many posts. So this means it's a one, signified by this little double line, to many, indicated by the little what they call crowfoot, meaning that you can have many posts. And so the post, here are things like post date time, post title, post excerpt, post status, and so forth. All the information, all the fields, all the columns related to a blog post, are sitting in this table. Here are WordPress comments. So a user can own comments and comment metadata. Here are WordPress links, which sit separately over here in the table over here. The WordPress taxonomy, WordPress terms. Now, what you don't see here, if you're familiar with WordPress, is the theme. In other words, the theme in WordPress is what makes it look the way it looks. Now, if you've used WordPress before, you know that once you have your content, all your text, all your pictures, all your blog posts, that you can change the theme anytime you want and the content's still there. That's because the theme is a bunch of files separate from the database. The theme stuff is not stored in the database. So you can switch the theme or the skin on top of the data all you want, and all the data pretty much works to that point. The point being that here is a series of database tables that are related, that represent a schema to manage content or manage information, essentially to allow you to architect your information to present a certain way. The power of WordPress is that you're not locked into a specific way of doing architecture. You can design menus or pages that have pages that go to other pages, and so you can kind of work with that, and all that's malleable within it. But here's a database that represents that. Now, maybe you've heard of Drupal. Drupal is sort of a much more enterprise-wide content management system. It's also local source. And let me just go down in size. If any indication of its level of complexity is clear by looking at this database schema, which is much, much more complicated than WordPress. And it's true, if this is any reflection of what you can do in Drupal, this database schema represents how much more complex you can get. And it's true, the learning curve on Drupal is steeper. Ultimately, it's much more powerful, and you can do enterprise-wide content management systems. I was at Yale University where they started using Drupal to manage all the websites at Yale University, for instance. And that's very complicated because you have multiple departments, schools, users, all need to be able to access it. So you start, let's look at some of these table titles and see if they make some sense. Taxonomy term, that's how you define a piece of content. And you, hopefully in this class, you'll learn about taxonomies. And this is how you identify a taxonomy with a particular piece of content. Taxonomy index. Let's see something that makes some sense. Comments, here's comments, comment body. And these get very complicated in terms of the way you manage the features and the way that it all appears. Let's see what's over here. User revisions, user picture, table just for user pictures. Here are the users. User ID, name, language code. Now, you're going to be learning about primary keys and foreign keys. Primary key is the key of the parent to child data, which is subordinate to that, typically in a one-to-many situation. So if you look at, here's user ID, under users is the primary key, and if we blow this up even more, in this particular ERD system, is identified by this little yellow thing, which in fact is a little key, primary key, which goes off to this key over here, which is user INT, same as that, but it's really the foreign key for the purpose of how it relates to the users. The reason there's a key here is that this primary key could be a primary key to some other table that needs to relate to it in a one-to-many relationship. So let's look at this one, sessions. So once again, it's a primary key relating to the table of sessions, meaning that, and you have a little infinite sign, which means that there can be as many sessions as you want. Users can have 1 to infinite number of sessions, and this little diamond means foreign key, meaning that it's the key of the parent table. So when you bring in users, when you have a session and you insert this number, all this data is available to this session, and all the sessions associated with this user are identified by the fact that it has this common foreign key here that's the same as what it would be up here. Let's look around a little bit more. These tables here are just things where certain kinds of data are stored for the purpose of certain kinds of reporting and data reporting. Every table has a primary key, whether it's used or not. Let's see what else we have here. Node access. And some tables will have multiple primary keys, which means that this one, let's see, so node is a one-to-many with follow the line to node access, and one of these other fields can act as a primary key to yet another table. They're not working in that capacity, but when they set up this table in database, they said, listen, this is the field that might need to be a primary key. So that's basically, so you can see how complicated it can get. So then again, I'll reduce that in size. So you can see that content management systems that's not managing specific content, that's managing any content you can think of, has to be very complex to manage just about any kind of schema or architecture that you want to impose on it. In Drupal, think of a menu as a bucket with related content in it. So the system has to be able to accommodate that to show it. But essentially, it's a content management system. The information is all being sort of stored and managed by the back end by this huge database that's in SQL, by the way. So I hope that makes you understand the importance of understanding the role of databases from a specific to an abstract concept as it relates to designing information systems and architecture. And I hope you see there's a relationship. And you might not design the database from here on forward, but it's important to understand that what's going on in the background when different systems that are used. Remember, a database information architecture can be just as file system, for instance, which is essentially sort of a database in terms of identifying file folders, which own folders, and there's files in those folders and so forth. And you can think of these as folders, this folder owning this folder, which owns that folder. Just another way of thinking about it. Okay, thank you. I hope that's helpful. And any questions, let me know.